Fight Mike here. Today we're going to be matchmaking up to the UFC Vegas card 108, headlined by Tatsuro Taira and Hyun Sung Park. I'm going to be setting up realistic fights that make sense for both fighters, that also make sense scheduling-wise and for the UFC. Starting off with the winner of the main event, Tatsuro Taira. I'm going to be matching him up with Taira France. I must say I would prefer the Royval or the Moreno fight than this one, but I think that Moreno versus Royval is probably happening. The rematch, the trilogy is probably happening at UFC Noche in the fight night later on this year. And even if Taira gets the opportunity, I do not think that he should be waiting and fighting 8 weeks from now in the UFC Noche. I think that's just giving Moreno too much of a chance to beat Taira. I think Taira should probably wait for a couple of months, recover for a little bit, keep improving his striking. And the thing is that he called for a title shot. He should not get it. People who are fighting off one fight winning streaks never win the title shot. And it's just not as exciting for the champion in this aspect. Or it's not as exciting for the fans either if they're getting these guys who don't really deserve the shot. I think, though, that Taira should look for this fight in like December or November. He should look to stay active. I think that he should also be looking at some other top-ranked flyweights. I was looking at rebooking the Amir Albazi fight, but I genuinely think Taira France is better than him, and Taira France basically beat him in their fight. So I think that for Taira, this is probably a very good fight to take. I think after Taira France just got beaten by Alexandre Pantoja, he should look to take on another guy with the same style to sort of prove that he has made adjustments. And for Taira, it's got a pretty clear blueprint made by Pantoja for him to follow against Taira France. So maybe he should look to do that. And I think that Taira needs to continually prove himself against these strikers with good takedown defense. As we saw in the Royval fight, once strikers do have really good takedown defense, he finds it much more difficult to fight against him. So I think that we need to put him up against a powerful striker with good takedown defense in Taira France. Manel Kape is also another good option, but I think he's a lot more dangerous than Taira France. So if I'm Tatsuro Taira's team, I'm picking Taira France. He just fought for the belt as well, so it's a good look if he can get a win over him, especially if he can make it easier than Pantoja was able to. Moving on to the next fight, though, we've got Hyun Sung Park. I've matched him up with Rafael Esteban. Esteban obviously fought as the second fight of the night on this card. Both guys need to stay active. Neither are massive names in the flyweight division. And Esteban needs to prove that he can actually make weight. In his last 3 fights, he's missed weight in 2 of them. This one by 4 pounds. So we need to get this guy against Hyun Sung Park. We need both of them to be fighting against each other. They're good prospects in their own rights. They're probably both only 1 or 2 wins away from the rankings. So for career progression-wise, this is absolutely the fight to make it. It's a winnable fight for both. It probably won't be the most exciting fight just because Esteban loves to hold you down on the ground and sort of pin you and not really land any ground and pound or go for a submission. And Hyun Sung Park is known to play bottom for a little bit too long. I don't think it would be an exciting fight, but I think in terms of both of their careers, they need this fight. Moving on to the next fight, though, we've got Chris Duncan. I've actually matched him up with Michael Chandler. I know that this seems really unlikely just because of the sort of fights that Michael Chandler continuously gets, but I could actually see this fight happening, especially if the UFC can go to the UK towards the end of the year or early next year. This would be a good co-main event feature fight for a UK fight night. One thing I'm going to say before I explain why I've given him Michael Chandler, I think that we got to stop giving these unranked lightweights 5 wins or a 5 to 7 win streak before they get a ranked opponent. These ranked guys are never defending their spots. I'm going to make a video later on in this week about it, but they're barely fighting. We see guys like Michael Chandler, who's coming to the UFC. I think he's 2-4 in the UFC. Never defended his spot. Never fought anyone unranked in his entire career in the UFC. How does that make sense? Yet we've got guys like Fares Ziam on 6-fight winning streaks. We had Ludovic Klein going 7 wins and 1 draw before getting a ranked opponent. And even then it was sort of a short notice opportunity. Nazim Sadikov right now, 4-0 and 1 draw. No looking at a ranked opponent either. Nasrat Hakparas going on a 5-fight winning streak. Another one who won't get a ranked opponent. We need these guys fighting against the bottom tier lightweights, the guys ranked in the bottom 5. You think you cannot tell me that Benoit Saint Denis or Moicano or Michael Chandler are not struggling with Fares Ziam. You're telling me that they're not struggling with Ludovic Klein. They're not struggling with Nazim Sadikov. I'll go a level lower. You're telling me they're not going to struggle with Ribovics. They're not going to struggle with Mateusz Rebecki. They're not struggling with Majtebek Oralbai. They're not struggling with Bahamondes. All of these guys I would actually pick to beat those 3 that I named, who are still ranked in the top 15 of the lightweight division. I think that we need to be putting these guys up against we need to be putting these ranked fighters who are in the 10 to 15 ranked range against guys who are unranked constantly. Unless it's like a Grant Dawson fight, where it's like Grant Dawson's fought like 3 opponents in a row whilst being ranked who are unranked. He should be getting fights against the top 5, top 7 opponents, top 10 opponents. But these top 15 opponents need to be fighting down if they lose. Especially guys like Chandler, who's 2-4 in the UFC. But Duncan deserves a ranked opponent next 100%. If Rebecki had won that fight, he would have been getting a ranked opponent 100%. That's 3 solid wins for Duncan. He's looked like an absolute beast in each performance. And Chandler's just been given like massive names for years. Even when he was giving a guy a time to make a name off him, it was Paddy Pimblett, who already has a massive name. We need Chandler to be fighting against someone who can genuinely make their entire name off him. Like Poirier did to Benoit. Like Gaethje did to Fiziev. When is Chandler having that opportunity? That time comes now, and he's getting demolished by the absolutely marauding Scotsman. Alright, Chandler? You're going to listen to that. Time to feed him to the wolves. Now, moving on to the Mateusz Rebecki, who had a fantastic performance, just coming up short against Chris Duncan. Matched him up against Thiago Moises. Moises was recently KO'd by Jared Gordon. He'll definitely need a little bit of time off after that one. And Rebecki took a ton of damage against Chris Duncan, in the second time taking damage in a year. And we've seen what happens to guys like Elves Brenner, who were repeatedly thrown to the wolves. They come close, they don't show improvements, and they lose. So, we need Rebecki to be fighting up against someone who's not in the same level as him, not in that 15 to 25 range of the unranked section of the lightweight division. And not like it's a warm-up fight, but avoid throwing him to Ludovic Klein right now. Avoid throwing him to Bahamondes right now, just coming off getting sent to the unranked part of the lightweight division. Give him Thiago Moises. Moises has had multiple opportunities throughout his career. He's shown to be a decent fighter, but he's shown not to be at the tip of the spear. I think Rebecki needs some proper pacing if he's going to amount to anything in the UFC. We can't just have some career destruction from him. And I think that they should make this fight as like a Fight Night main card fight for like a January to March Fight Night card, somewhere around that time. We can't do what Elves Brenner did, where we feed him to... feed him to Esteban Ribovics. We feed him to Joel Alvarez, and then we feed him to Majtebek Oralbai. We are not doing that to Rebecki. Rebecki's really fun. We're not killing his career, alright? Moving on to the next fight, then we've got Esteban Ribovics. I matched him up with Ludovic Klein. Klein fought very recently against Gamrot, and I think he's still definitely a top like 15 to 20 ranked lightweight, and this fight would be absolute fireworks. When you watch Ribovics fight, he's sort of like a marathon runner. He's not throwing everything into his shots, but he's still got the cardio in the last rounds, and he's kind of builds as the fight goes along. Ludovic Klein fights like Rafael Fiziev without the body kicks. He fights like he's sprinting like Usain Bolt the entire time. It'll be a striker versus striker matchup. Completely different style strikers though, mind you, with the explosive style of Klein and the marathon style of Ribovics. It would be such an interesting fight to see between these two. I don't care if Ludovic Klein lost last time out to Gamrot. Whoever wins this fight gets a ranked opponent, no doubt about it. This fight screams violence between the two. So let's put this on. Moving on to the next matchup we've got for Elves Brenner. I put him up against Ismael Bonfim. Like Mateusz Rebecki, I'm not trying to kill Elves Brenner's career. I think he could be ranked level at one point in his career, maybe. And the only way that we can do this is not by giving him another killer. We don't give him Ignacio Bahamondes right now. We have to give him someone a little bit lower down, like an Ismael Bonfim. Ishmael's coming off a KO loss to Nazim Sadikov, another guy who should be given a ranked opponent, but Nazim sort of head kick KO'd him, but it was in between rounds that the KO was actually signed, just because I think that Ishmael Bonfim was having a struggle seeing. But I think that this is a perfect fight for both of them, where Bonfim looked pretty good before that fight, and he'd be looking to come back up in the rankings, and Elvis Brenner's probably just looking to stay in the UFC, keep his contract right now, so let's not just give him another killer. Moving on to the next fighter, we've got Neil Magny. I've put him up against Seok-Hong KO after his vintage Magny performance, that I called, mind you, in his fight on the weekend, but he fought against Alessio Zaleski dos Santos, another sort of unk matchup. Now he needs to serve as a gatekeeper yet again. Siok is another grappler. He's a lot smaller than Magny, so Magny shouldn't have any troubles taking this fight. And if I'm Magny, I'm probably asking for this. They're going to throw him to that German guy, Islam Dulatov, who's way more dangerous. I'd be calling for Siok on KO, a guy who you've got a neat path to victory against. Moving on to the next fight, though, we've got Kevin Vallejos. I've matched him up, actually, with Pat Sabatini. I know this doesn't make sense to the untrained eye, but listen to this. I've made, like, a little crafty, like, career progression for Kevin Vallejos. I think Vallejos looked good against Danny Silva, but I think that we need to see a little bit more from him. He's only 23 years old. Let's not throw him straight into the rankings. Let's sort of do what a Tabor Gautier is doing at the moment and just cleaning up people outside the rankings. They're around the same age. They should be doing the same thing. Sabatini, though, is actually a very skilled opponent. He's probably sitting in that 15 to 25 range of the unranked part of the featherweight division. And he's a great test for Vallejos. I think the main reason why I wanted to make this fight is that I don't want to see Vallejos come into the top 15 of the division and then come up against like a David Onama, who just holds him onto the floor and just hugs him to a decision win. We cannot see that from Vallejos. We need to keep all of his aura, all of his hype. So let's put him against Pat Sabatini, who's clearly going to try and grapple his way to victory. Hardcore fans as well, if they see this fight on a fight card, they know it's going to be dangerous for Vallejos. And they also know that if Vallejos can win this, he's a very well-touted prospect. And even if he loses, let's say, to Pat Sabatini, worst comes to worst. I know we don't want Pat Sabatini in the top 15, but it's not a necessarily damaging loss. Pat Sabatini is not the type of guy to overhand right you and shut you off for 7 minutes, nor the type of guy to elbow you to oblivion, breaking your face. And he's also not the guy to completely humiliate you. So if Vallejos loses, it's not detrimental to his career long term, and even could be beneficial to his career in the grappling aspect. Moving on to the next fight, though, the guy that Kevin Vallejos clearly beat, Danny Silva. I've put him up against Stephen Nguyen. If you don't remember Stephen Nguyen, he fought maybe last week or the week before and dropped Muhammad Yahya like thousands of times, holding the knockout record. And I think for the fans that watch these two fight cards, they're going to remember Silva for eating all of Vallejos' shots. And they're going to remember Stephen Nguyen for landing all those knockdowns. So it's a good recognizable fight against some decent-ish prospects. More on the Stephen Nguyen side. But it'd be a fun fight that I think all the fans would enjoy watching. Moving on to the next one, it's Rinya Nakamura's opponent. I want to put him against Damon Blackshear. I think timing-wise this works. I mainly just want to see this fight because I think stylistically it would be really fun. Both guys are really explosive. Damon Blackshear has shown some really good wrestling throughout his career, and it'd be nice to see him come up against Rinya Nakamura, and both are so explosive. And Nakamura needs to come back from that Muin Gafarov loss. This Nathan Fletcher win in a minute does not put the band-aid on the wound. It needs to be a guy better than Muin Gafarov. We're not seeing Nakamura fight against these unranked guys with no name and thinking, oh yeah, he's going to beat Muin Gafarov now. Even though Muin Gafarov's terrible, we need to see Rinya Nakamura come up against someone we see as comfortably better than Muin Gafarov, so we can still see Nakamura as like a really high-touted prospect. We can look at that Gafarov fight and be like, yeah, but Nakamura didn't shoot until he was hurt, that's why he lost. We can at least have that if he can beat a guy like Damon Blackshear. Moving on to the last fight, though, it's for Austin Bashi. I've matched him up with Bogdan Grad. I think the Bashi needs to come up against someone who's got decent-ish grappling, someone who's like a solid all-round fighter, and Bogdan Grad is exactly that. He's a decent striker, he's okay in the grappling, he's pretty durable. And it's sort of a prospect-on-prospect matchup. Bogdan Grad got to have that close fight with Muhammad Naimov, someone with the Ov last name, which always looks good on the resume. But it's a decent prospect versus a good prospect, so it's not going to look bad if Austin Bashi can completely smoke Bogdan Grad. We'll look at Bashi like he's better than Muhammad Naimov and Felipe Lima, so I think this would be a pretty good win if he could get Bogdan Grad out of there in the first round. Let me know what you think of all of these fights that I put together, though. As always, if you enjoyed the video, like and subscribe, and I'll catch you next time. Peace.